All right, now it's discussion time right here on a Business AM. Thank you so much for keeping it Metropole TV. Once again, my name is Nina Shivan, standing in for Simba Elijah Charles Kiage. Now, with me in studio is Kevin Mwangi, who is on my immediate right. He's an investment analyst. And to the far right, we have Peter Amunga, who's a labor and a financial expert. Now, gentlemen, a very good morning, first of all.
Morning.
Yes. I say it's quite cold, so I hope Metropole TV has been kind enough to keep you warm with something warm to drink. Yeah. All right. Safaricom appoints former CEO Michael Joseph as the interim boss. But before we get there, I'd like us to just dwell maybe just a few minutes on how Kenyans have really come out to mourn Bob Collymore. What is your take? What are your sentiments around this whole losing the Safaricom boss and how Kenyans have taken it in?
Well, on my part, I'll say, Bob, let me just say Safaricom as a whole is now part of Kenyan DNA. It's like Kenyans have embraced Safaricom. It's theirs. They own it. It is their unique way of life. It's like their meal. So for Kenyans, Safaricom means almost everything. And so the loss of Bob, and Bob had also endeared himself to Kenyans in a very special way. Apart from just being a CEO, he was part and parcel of the Kenyan life. He was in the social life of Kenyans. He had married a Kenyan. So he was Kenyan. And so Kenyans are identifying with him because he was part of our DNA. And so I think Kenyans are mourning him because they appreciate him. And the unique things he had brought to Safaricom that were resounding very well with Kenyans. Tunikiwa na Safaricom, Blaze Safaricom. You know, all these small things made up Bob. And because of that, I think Kenyans connected with him. Yeah. And they just loved him. 9 years
is quite a long time. What do you think, Kevin?
I think for me, Bob being one of the CEO of the largest company in terms of profitability in Kenya and the way he demystified being a CEO of the biggest company in Kenya and the way he used to interact with Kenyans, you know, on Twitter, he just demystified that position. And when he said that, I saw someone write on Twitter, when Bob said that he's in love with Kenya, when you look at other foreign expatriates, when they mean that, they look at things like Mount Kenya, the parks that we have. But for Bob, when he said that he's in love with Kenya, he was in love with the people.
Literally?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a sort of a order of events. Bob Collymore died of myeloid leukemia cancer just the very early morning of Monday, and that's the 1st of July, just a few days ago. Anyway, so Safaricom has gone on to employ, or rather take in Michael Joseph, who's the chairman of Kenya Airways, as their firm's interim chief executive following the death of the one and only Bob Collymore on Monday. In a statement on Tuesday, Safaricom's company secretary, Catherine Maundu, said that the appointment takes effect until the board fills up the position on a permanent basis. Now, my question, I'll throw it to you first, Kevin. What do you see as the immediate challenge that Michael Joseph will have to confront?
For me, I don't think there's a major challenge that he'll have to confront. Even after Michael Joseph left being the CEO of Safaricom, he still sits on the board of Safaricom. So
as a director, yes.
As a director. So I think things will just continue moving as they've been. I think now the challenge his biggest challenge for him and his board of directors will be naming the next CEO, given the wrangles or the conflict that they're having with the government of Kenya. Yes.
I don't know, but I don't think, okay, Kenyans, I was going through social media, but they really felt there are some able people, younger even than maybe Michael Joseph, who could have done a better job. They're talking about Sylvia Mlinge, the lady who has been in charge of corporate affairs, and there's a big talk that, you know, she should have just been given a chance to act in that capacity. Bring in a person who was retired and sits on the board. There's a big difference between sitting on the board and running the day-to-day activities of a mega conglomerate like Safaricom.
That he ran a couple of years back.
Years back. And the challenges he faced those years when he began Safaricom cannot be the same challenges that are there today. And apart from that, Bob believes, okay, both of them are CEOs. Of course, they're experts. And I believe they have some unique qualities. And they have the DNA of Safaricom in them, the two of them, you know, the late Bob and Michael. But the difference is, and that is now what has given Safaricom a brand, is that Bob gave it the Kenyan face, the Kenyanness in it. Michael at one point was accused of one time when Kenyans made some noise about Safaricom and how it was being run, he made a statement that still rings up to today, that Kenyans have a peculiar, he said they have peculiar calling habits. You know, he seemed to remove himself from Kenya. So he said Kenyans have peculiar calling habits. Now those words were like, it's like saying, you guys are like this, we are not like you.
Yeah.
So
he put himself aside.
Yeah, he removed himself, which Bob did not. Bob made himself Kenyan and Safaricom. So that's why you've seen even the activity on Twitter and everywhere is that, you know, they felt maybe another person could have done it. But I'm not saying that Michael Joseph cannot do it. He knows what Safaricom is. He's the founder. He's a pioneer.
The founder.
Yeah, so he really knows
from inception
exactly what is needed. But again, we need now to ask ourselves some very serious questions here. If he's the chairman of Kenya Airways, and we all know how Kenya Airways is doing, it's not doing very well. So the question is, how come the magic that was in Safaricom could not work or has not worked in Kenya Airways?
Okay, just before we get to that, we have Michael Joseph, he's the reason behind Safaricom, yes? And then he did a very good job. And then we got Bob Collymore. By the time Bob Collymore by the time he passed away, the Safaricom price share was at 28 shillings and he found it as 5 shillings. What type of character, what type of personality, what type of qualifications would the next person have to fit in those shoes?
For me, I think when you look at Safaricom, like when you look at the share from 5 to 28, the biggest driver of that has been innovation. So for the next CEO, he has to have the eyes of the ones that Bob
He
had.
has to have. It can be a she. I don't know what you're saying, Kevin.
He or she. They have to have the eyes that Bob had. Because I think when you look at Safaricom right now, I think it has plateaued. Like when you look at the results they announced for the last financial year, 7% growth, it means that now growth is starting to plateau. Now I have to look for other innovative ways to grow revenue. When you look at voice and data, so they have reached points where unless you innovate and look for more ways to generate revenue from other sources, that's how they are going to derive more value for shareholders. So I think I think the partnership with Vodafone, and I usually confuse the two, Vodafone. Yeah, so when the UK parent company moved out of Africa and sold its stake to the South African entity, so it gives Safaricom now the room now to expand to other countries before they couldn't compete with the African entity.
In fact, it was Bob's dream to actually expand in Ethiopia. He wanted to start off with Ethiopia. Anyway, Amunga, what type of human, what type of management do you see taking over Bob's position?
You see, what Safaricom will need is a person who can sell the Kenyan brand. Safaricom, as much as it had a lot of shares from foreigners and all that kind of thing, and Vodafone and all that, but it had become a Kenyan thing. It's Kenyan. M-Pesa is Kenyan. Actually, the innovator or the person who came up with this is a Kenyan. So Safaricom is Kenyan. The way it does its thing, the colors look Kenyan. So a person who must do Safaricom must Kenyanize it and then sell this Kenyan thing or Kenyan brand to other countries. So a person who can make Safaricom Kenyan and then sell it as a brand from Kenya, a gift from Kenya to the rest of the world. So like M-Pesa, it can be sold to the rest of the world as a Kenyan gift. This is a gift from Kenya to Ethiopia, to Uganda, or wherever. So I tend to think that Safaricom will be struggling very hard to get a person like Bob. What Bob did for Safaricom and what Michael Joseph, I tend to feel, that's my personal view, could not do, was that Bob made Safaricom Kenya.
Kevin, listening to what Amunga is saying, do you agree that maybe it's not the best move to have Michael Joseph act as the boss of Safaricom right now? Considering he did mention a point earlier on that now Michael Joseph has been put into standing, or rather has been put in as a boss at KQ, and KQ is not doing very well at the moment. Is it fair to blame him for that? And what are your sentiments when it comes to him standing in until Safaricom, standing in as Safaricom's boss until they find a good option or a better option?
Okay, maybe just to start with the KQ bit first. We have to look at when Bob Colimo joined KQ. I think
Michael Joseph.
Michael Joseph, sorry. By the time he joined KQ, and I think by the time he was joining, when he was nominated as the chairman, I think things had gone haywire at KQ, and the problems that are facing KQ, those ones, they are major problems. Which even if you bring the best CEO from anywhere, I think they'll have a challenge. Shida too. We've seen Sebastian Mikos resign. He'll be resigning in December. This is someone who turned around a Polish airline. But when it comes to KQ, he's having certain challenges in terms of turning it around. So I think when you look at Michael Joseph and KQ, I think the problems of KQ are very much different from the ones that we're looking at when it comes to Safaricom. And also when it comes to Safaricom, he's only an interim chief. In my view, the people who are running the show, it's still the Ogutus, Sylvia Mulinges and everyone. So for him, it's just there until the situation of who's going to be the next CEO is sorted out. It's just an interim basis.
So do you think there is a reason for any investor to worry?
For me, this is not material information. Whatever Safaricom does, we'll still continue doing it, and I don't think it is going to affect the fundamentals of Safaricom. So for investors, nothing to panic about.
All right, well and good. Let's leave that topic behind. Amunga?
No.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
you have something to say?
No. Michael Joseph just has to become Kenyan. He has to learn how to be a Kenyan, and he'll run the company. This is a Kenyan dream. It's a Kenyan thing. Michael Joseph, if you want to do a good job,
become Kenyan. All right. Now, moving on swiftly, let's take a look at the 10 acres of Naivasha port handed to South Sudan. Just to bring you up to speed, Kenya will allocate 10 acres of land to South Sudan for construction of a dry port at the Naivasha Special Economic Zone, making it the second country after Uganda to gain from the inland container depot. President Uhuru Kenyatta said the 10 acres will be given to South Sudan at the Naivasha Industrial Park to ease the movement of goods to the neighboring nation. It is said that the port will see South Sudan cut the journey that it makes to Mombasa to collect clear goods destined to Juba. Now, what is your take on this gesture? But just before that, let's listen in. All right, I apologize for that. That's for the next topic of discussion, which is about Ilemi, the Ilemi Triangle. But let's go back to the 10 acres that Kenya has handed over to South Sudan at the inland container depot. What is your take on this gesture? I'll start off with you.
I think there's more avenues to create viability for the SGR. The way currently SGR is, and if you don't give these countries a dry port inland, especially in Naivasha, then it doesn't make any sense for the SGR to be ferrying containers from Mombasa to Naivasha. So I think it's more of an SGR play, ensuring that the new track that we've built becomes of use, because if nothing goes to Naivasha, then we have a rail that is just sitting idle. That's my view.
Yeah, I think it's just business, and it's good business. A dry port now. This is the second one. Uganda now has a dry port also in Naivasha, Southern Sudan. We hope also Rwanda, Burundi, maybe we'll also think about the same thing. That is okay. That's good neighborness. It is what's encouraged right now in the current economies. It's being done in the EU, European Union. It's being done in the Americas. So That's okay, that's normal. The question that always comes up now only is, what also comes with it? Yeah, what's the catch? Who are the major players here? Everything that you see, there's always something behind. I always believe that there are always two sides to the coin. What we see, there may be some other things. There may be another carrot being dangled somewhere which you may not know. And that's normally the only problem in African politics and African business. But if it was just clean business, this is the way to go all over the world.
Okay. All right, so it's just Biashara. We'll leave that alone for now. Still on water, South Sudan and Kenya relationship. Leaders from Kenya and South Sudan have signed a memorandum of understanding for boundary delimitation and demarcation around Ilemi Triangle, an area that has been in dispute between the two countries for so many years now. The leaders and heads of subnational governments from two countries, led by Turkana Governor Josephat Nanog, Cabinet Secretary of Mining John Munez, and the governor from Sudan, Capoeira governor called Louis Lobong from Capoeira, yes, held a meeting yesterday to discuss how to fast-track the implementation of an MOU, because as you can see, the president of Sudan and the president of Kenya are just trying to go on with their business to make sure that there's a proper trade relationship between the two countries. So any other conflict needs to be settled as fast as possible. And the main conflict between South Sudan and Kenya is the Ilemi Triangle. Let's listen in to what the leaders had to say. All right, now, gentlemen, you've just seen or you've just heard what the three different leaders had to say when it comes to Martins Ilemi, and they keep on pushing the agenda of peace between the Toposo people and the Turkana people in that area. Amunga, I'd like to start off with you. What are your sentiments when it comes to the conflict that is going on in Ilemi and the different conflicts that we usually have as Kenya as a country with this borderline issues? Because
Yeah.
this is not the first one we're hearing.
No, it's not, of course. Migingo issue has been with us for some time now. The thing that I think and I've seen and I've read is that at the Iremi Triangle, it appears to be a rich area in terms of oil, but it's totally remote. If you read about it, it's a small place, it's not a very large place, and the Toboso people are very hostile. Actually, those who have interacted with them say banditry and ambushes and use of illicit guns, massacres. It's like the order of the day there. It's not a controlled area. Actually, even the South Sudan government itself cannot even manage it. What we see in West Pokot is child play compared to what happens at Iremi Triangle. The Toboso people are very hostile. And if you read about it, you can actually shiver. But now the issue is this. Territory is territory. No matter how remote, how far it looks like territory, always is territory. And for political expedience, our politicians would learn to have territory. It's just like how you hear people talk in Kenya, anataka plot. Also, that's how countries are. Countries are after territory. What we call plot in our small language or in our small dealings is what countries like Kenya and Southern Sudan call territory. Now, the issue like the port that we just talked about earlier, the dry port, these are some of the things that now come into play. We can give you 10 acres of this.
You want an exchange program.
And you guys can do for us
this,
this triangle thing. That's how it works.
Kevin?
Just the way it's mentioned, I think it's a resource play. And then also when you have to look at the economic activity of these two major communities in that area, I think pastoralists,
They're
I
all
guess.
pastoralists.
Yeah? So I'm sure also there's conflict in terms of herding areas, water and everything that is there.
And the funny thing is that they speak the same language.
Yeah. They just speak the same language.
They're practically
but they are
one.
very hostile to one another because of that cattle raiding and rustling and all that kind of thing.
So what's the best way to settle the conflict? Apart from Amunga's of case 10 acres, give us this. So what would be the best way from where you're sitting?
The best way, I think, obviously they have to determine where the border is and the owner of that piece of land is determined. But I think, as you've seen Kenya, I think Kenya is a bit very in terms of defending its boundaries. We've seen Migingo, a lot of conflict on Migingo. Now we have an issue in the Indian Ocean.
Yeah, Somali.
So you can notice that there are many resource areas that Kenya can tap into, but the way it's handling its geographical boundaries, that's where the issue is. So I think Kenya needs to sort out a lot of issues, and not only on the Ilemi Triangle, but on all these areas.
Actually, just to add on what you said, our problem with our boundaries started from the colonial times, because there were a lot of issues that were left unresolved. You see, there's even no line. Okay, there's nothing. Even the Iremi Triangle, actually, when you are in it, you're not sure if you're in Kenya or wherever, because there's nothing to really demarcate. They speak the same language, the people on this side speak the same language, the other people on the other side. That's reminded me about even the only country we're not having conflict with the border is Tanzania. However, one time when the governor in Tanzania, I think that was just before independence, was enjoying, and they were having their wine and enjoying their beer. The guy in Kenya, the governor in Kenya, gave them Mount Kilimanjaro as a gift. So Mount Kilimanjaro was on the Kenyan side. And if you look at the Kenyan map, when it reaches the Mount Kilimanjaro part, it does a funny thing there. Because it was a birthday gift where guys were making merry and drinking. So all these things finally will come to haunt us. Our children's children. One day you can be sure someone will say Mount Kilimanjaro is Kenyan and we want it back. You can be sure.
I'd like us to move on. Let's take a look at what's going on with the World Bank that is backing Kenya's Big Four agenda. Just to quickly bring you up to speed, World Bank Vice President for Africa, Professor Ghanem, has assured of the Bretton Woods institution's support for Kenya's Big Four development blueprint. Now, Mr. Ghanem Ghanem, while paying a courtesy call on President Uhuru Kenyatta at State House, Nairobi, singled out the provision of affordable healthcare as an area that is his organization. His organization is keen on collaborating with the government to ensure its success. And he went on further and to say that the World Bank is committed to supporting Kenya in advancing the Big Four agenda, both in technical and financial cooperation. What is your take?
I think that's a very good move. I think when you look at Kenya right now, and I have to applaud the Jubilee government for this one. I think healthcare cost, I think it's the biggest impediment in terms of financial independence in Kenya. If you get sick slightly, then people are forced to sell their assets just to meet the medical costs. But I think even for Kenya now, there's a lot we have to do, especially with NHIF. We contribute a lot. NHIF collects so much money. And I think in terms of achieving universal healthcare, I think NHIF can take up almost 80% of achieving that Big Four achieving that agenda on its own. But I think there's a lot that needs to be done on the NHIF side. So even as we bring in other partners like World Bank and everyone else, it's not like we are solely dependent on them, but that they're just bringing the technical capacity and the little bit that we need just to ensure that there is
all right. So now that World Bank is offering support, does that mean Kenya's debt is about to grow?
No.
No?
No. World Bank gave us 75 billion a few months, actually on 31st of May this year. World Bank are business people. They have to do business with Kenya. Actually, some time back during Moi's regime, we had something we were calling structural adjustment programs, funny things like that. And these guys come to do business. World Bank is a business body. It's a business entity. In fact, the advice they are giving this government, most of it is wrong. That's the truth. And the fact goes that we are going to get deeper into debt because they are giving us more debt, they're giving us more money, so that to fund these things that we're talking about called the Big Four agenda and other programs. I want to give a very good example. Even the new curriculum that you're talking about, which already now is in a lot of question, and you can see the headlines today in today's papers. It's a World Bank project. World Bank is looking for business avenues. They give you a suggestion, they tell you, go do this, we will fund you. They are funding you knowing what they need. That loan comes with interest. They will get their money back. Like the loan we have right now, it's for 30 years. Our children's children in the next 30, 40, 50 years will be paying this loan that we are taking today. World Bank, to me, they're not helping Kenyans. They're out to reap from us, and they're not giving us unique, like I said when we were starting to talk about the Safaricom thing. Kenyans need to tailor the economy to be theirs. World Bank gives us things that are foreign to us and wants us to experiment with them. Most of the arrangements with this government, most of the suggestions they are making, and they are giving most of their money not to the agricultural sector. Most of the money that is coming in is going to things like what we call infrastructure, and things to do with roads, things to do with those SGRs, things to do with telecommunications. They are not talking about agriculture. World Bank is putting almost new money to agriculture. According to me, just advice for them to get business from us.
You agree?
Not totally. I think obviously Kenya has some shortcomings, and I think some technical capacity might help. In terms of whether it's going to blow up debt, I'm not really sure, because we are not really sure of how the agreement will be as per se. And also when you look at such, I believe it might come in as a grant, which is yes, you can take on debt, but as a grant it becomes easier for Kenya to finance it. So we also have to look at different perspectives, but for me, I think NHIF can be the main driver in terms of driving universal healthcare in this country.
All right. Just stick right there. We're still on Martha's health. So, Homa Bay Women Representative Gladys Mwangi has proposed a bill that will enable the lowest cadre of healthcare providers to diagnose cancer as early as possible. Now, Mwangi, who was diagnosed with colorectal cancer in 2014, says that the disease has become a major killer in the country because it is diagnosed late when it has advanced. Her sentiments, of course, come a day after Safaricom Chief Executive Officer Bob Collymore, who was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, a form of blood cancer, succumbed to the disease. Now, cancer is the third highest cause of deaths in Kenya, with 7% of deaths per year after infectious diseases and cardiovascular diseases. And there are estimated about 39,000 new cases of cancer each year in Kenya, with more than 27,000 deaths per year. Let's listen in. Okay, listening to that, gentleman, my first question to you, should cancer be declared a national disaster?
Yeah, actually, you said it's the third, but actually, from the look of things, it's actually the first now, because cancer is really killing. And at first it used to be, people used to say it's a lifestyle disease, lifestyle, the way you eat and all that. But now it's no longer that. It's a disease that is really eating into our economies. And any family that has a cancer patient, it's almost a declaration of poverty in that family, because the moment it comes in and it's there, it's so expensive to treat. It is important we think about it as a country very seriously. And as the honorable members are saying, let it actually be, as you've even put it, let it just be declared a national disaster. It is a disaster.
Kevin?
I'm sure when you tell the government to declare it as a national disaster, they'll give you reasons why it hasn't met the criteria. But I think cancer it has become something major in terms of detection, treatment, and everything, because I think in Kenya, most of the challenges that we're having is late detection. You get sick, you're diagnosed with all the other issues, like, for example, what Bob said. And then later it's discovered that it's cancer. So I think in Kenya, we need to sort out the detection bit.
All right, just allow me to put this into play. Let me paint a picture for you. Before Bob Collymore died, and he did an interview with one of the local TV stations, and he stated that even during his tests, he parted with $1,000. That's 100,000 Kenyan shillings. According to statistics, if a person is diagnosed with cancer and they decide to go abroad, they can spend up to 6 million shillings just for treatment. What does the government need to do to make sure, because that means if you don't have money, or if you're not as privileged, you can't afford your tests and you can't afford treatment, so you're dead. So what does the government need to do to rectify that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Actually, the problem is the government. And even those people you see talking there, those are the problems that we have. The truth of the matter is, this is a very serious issue.
It is.
And in any serious economy or government, this is something that will be taken. You will not have politicians talking that kind of talk there. You'll have technocrats talking and doing something about it. But in Kenya, we wait for politicians to make mileage out of things like this. This is not something to make mileage out of. But you see what those guys are doing, that's mileage. They'll go to talk about it in parliament and maybe make some noise and make some headlines and be seen on TV. And then they go back to their houses and go to be treated in India.
What class?
Now, I want to say this.
Okay, wonderful.
Let us as Kenyans reach a place and separate politics from life. The day we'll do it as a country, that's the day we'll move on. Cancer is a serious matter. Any country in this world is taking it as a very serious issue. Detection, getting to know if you are sick of cancer or not. That's a basic thing that can be done. Machines can be brought in, experts can be trained. We have young people right now who want to be trained in those kind of things. She's putting it very clearly. A small thing that a nurse does in, say, in Britain, you discover a nurse in Kenya cannot even attempt.
And that's exactly what she's trying to push for. She's
Yes,
trying to
but
push for training for nurses.
talk.
She's trying to push for training for oncologists. So
Yes.
what she's saying is that's just all talk.
That's talk.
There's no implementation.
Because what she's saying, we all know. Who doesn't know that? You think people in government don't know? They know that. But they also know, hapo hakuna mahali tutakulia. Sasa tutakulia hapo wapi? So the poor person atabaki the way you are. Unless watu wafanye mchango, wapeleke huyo mtu India to get treatment. The rest of the... Right now as I speak to you, the governor of Bomet and a good friend of mine, Madam Joyce Laboso, is undergoing treatment, and his cancer treatment in hospital in London. She's been there, this is the 3rd month now. Our MP for Kibera, our friend and MP at Kibera, Ken Okoth is in London right now. These are parliamentarians we're talking about. People with means. When we talk about a governor, we talk about the person who runs the healthcare in a county government. This is the person who the funds come to. This is the person who should be training those oncologists, because health is a devolved function of the government. So when a governor can be out of the country to be treated for the same for the last 3 months out of her office, it means that's a very serious issue.
What about this? Kenya does not have.
It doesn't have. The governor knows.
What I wanted to close this discussion. What do you have to say about all this?
I think, as just mentioned, I think the key thing out of it, I think, is priorities. Even in terms of, very saying policy, in terms of even funding, when we create our budgets, what's the priority? We can't be allocating so much money to other things like infrastructure development, and then
we have the health sector, we have the agricultural sector.
Yeah, so you have other sectors which basically you're pumping money to this other side. This other side is just draining all that money. So at the end of the day, you have citizens who can't afford healthcare, especially when it comes to cancer. It's totally expensive, and if they don't have insurance, majority of Kenyans, I don't think they don't have insurance. Then the ones who are, if you're not formally employed, there's a very big probability that you'll not have an insurance cover.
That's true.
And when it hits that side of those citizens, now that's when things get bad. So I think policy in terms of how do we fund our healthcare, priorities and everything, yeah.
We lack priority.
Yes, and just to make it clear a bit, it's not the politicians to talk about it. We have our educated people in the universities in this. Go to Aga Khan, there's the cancer center. We have Texas Cancer Center here in Nairobi. We have people who know what can be done. Actually, I believe they've written papers, research papers. There are the universities here. But they are gathering dust on shelves of the Ministry of Health, at Afya House. The problem in Kenya is talk. We talk too much.
No action.
We talk, man. We love talk. But the day a person like Kibaki will come in and who doesn't talk much but does action. That's the day we get a difference. That's when we see our economy grow from almost 0 to 7. But as of now, we've gone back to the talk thing. And that's what our friends you have seen on TV they are doing. They'll talk and go to be treated in the US and wherever as they leave us here.
Okay, thank you, Amunga. Moving on swiftly. There's a mystery as banks record huge profits amid bad loans. What am I talking about? Kenyan banks are increasingly reporting non-performing assets amid huge profits. So I'd like us to examine this paradox. How can banks stay on the profit path while taming bad loans? It doesn't make sense. Or does it make sense? I mean, you're the expert. Bring us up to speed.
Okay. If you look at the last 2 years and you look at bank profitability, so in 2017, things were flat. Banks were implementing the interest rate cap. So in terms of interest income, nothing was
This is now during the extended electioneering period.
Yeah.
All right.
But now come to 2018, obviously people saw banks recording profits, but you also have to look at where those profits were coming from. And the main business of a bank is lending out money. But if you look at net interest income, for most banks, the growth was very marginal or flat. But now when you come to look at provisions for bad debts, last year IFRS 9 came into play, but banks were given the option of writing off increased provision. The provisions they make for bad loans, they were given that provision to write it off against the balance sheet. There's a line in the balance sheet called loan loss reserves. So the banks which had huge loan loss reserves, the increase in bad debts, they were offset against that. So last year, the banks which reported huge profits, it's not because that they were doing business more, it's because they cut costs and they were able to write off their provisions against a certain line item in the balance sheet. So that's how profits were generated last year. Yes.
Amunga, any sentiments in this?
Yeah.
We just leave it to
my statements are always harsh, but I want to be soft. I want to say
kindly, because I feel like Kevin is doing a really good job at being calm. You on the other hand, you're just
let me try to be soft. Actually,
all right, go ahead.
The banks, I tend to think banking sector is always a reflection of the health, the health of a country, the economic health of a country. And when you see banks make profit, yet people are
Crying, they don't have
crying,
money.
they don't have the money. Actually, that is how Kenya is. That we have a few rich people making a lot of money from these very poor people. Somebody was called JM Karek who said, we'll have a country of, did he say 1 million? He said 10 millionaires and 10 million paupers. That is how it is. The few who have it. And that's what the Bible sometimes says. If you have, more is added unto you. And that's what happens in a funny capitalist system like this one of ours, a man-eat-man society, whereby we are exploiting you properly. We are draining the little joys out of every Kenyan. These young people you see hustling out here, whom we call hustler, and I'm using it the way it is, hustler. Yes. The hustling nation, we are draining them. So the rich guys who are able, and many of them escape without even paying taxes, are the ones now who are making those banks manage. Because their monies are in those banks. So they give their money to those banks. The banks give to these poor fellows. These poor fellows try to sell everything, sweets, handkerchiefs, at the bus stops, try to pay the loan. Finally, their things are auctioned. So still this rich guy who has it continues to enjoy. That's what we call capitalism. A bad type of capitalism that you find in a country like Kenya. Poor, bad.
So how can we
horrible.
fix it?
Okay, my sentiments will be a bit different from yours, but
soft.
In 2019, I don't see banks recording the profits that they did last year. This year, I think the provisions are going to increase, and this time the provisions will start hitting the income statement. So this year, most probably banks will. I'm sure, for example, banks like KCB, they won't be reporting 17% increase in profit after tax. I think this year they'll be a bit slower. And also when you look at bad loans, I think despite banks not lending as much as they used to lend before, bad loans are still increasing. And that is a very true picture of what is happening in the economy.
But the bad loans are the ones that are being given to those young people selling sweets on the road. And
Yes.
You see, the bank will come back and say, I want my money.
Finally, they'll recover the money, whether you like it or not.
They'll recover, but you can remember, I think, even when we look at government debt, we also have to look at what the government owes to the private sector. And that figure, I think, when they mention it, they look at a certain financial year. But cumulatively, when you look at from, let's say, like 2013 to right now, how much has not been paid to the private sector, I think that figure is massive. And I hope Uhuru's directive is going to be acted on, because if these SMEs are not paid what they are owed as per his directive, I think things are going to be they're going to be very worse.
Yeah, and you see what I disagree with you, Kevin, here is last year they made all those huge profits despite the fact that there were controls, the limit, of the taxes. But those limits have now been removed. These guys will continue to make profit out of poor people. And it's what Charles Darwin said in the book called Evolution, survival for the fittest. The few can survive, and those are those two banks. And other things that have come in, money lenders like Tala, sorry to mention names on show. But those are the people who are going to make money out of those poor people. That is the truth of the matter.
Thank you, Amunga. Thank you so much. Now, that's it for our show this morning. Thank you so much, Kevin, for coming in. That was Kevin Mwangi, who is an investment analyst, and our very good friend, Peter Amunga, who's a labor and financial expert. My name is Nina Shivan. Thank you so much for keeping it Metropole TV. Thank you for keeping it Business AM. Your loyalty means a lot to us. Remember, your comments are key to our success, so you can always reach out to us across our social media platforms. That's Metropole TV Kenya on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. My name is Nina Shaban. Please do enjoy the rest of your day.